Hi, I'm Matt from the Loom of Time.
I'm Shieldsy from Evocatus.
And this is the Tomb of Lime podcast, where we talk about heavy metal music and culture. This is going to be the start of our track-by-track series of the Loom of Time album NihilReich. We're starting with The Ashes of Your Fall. So yeah, we're here to talk about track one.
Track one,
NihilReich, which is The Ashes of Your Fall. I think it was the first song I wrote, first song we released, first song on the album, of course, and first song we played live. It was just, for probably a lot of people, it was the introduction to who we are and our music.
Yep.
And I think that's probably about right, because it's a bit of an overture, if you know what I mean. It's got a little bit of what's to come on the album.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps not intentionally, because, again, I didn't know what my vision was for the whole thing. I was just like, all right, I'm going to write a song now. First one,
That's
see
what
how it goes.
Yeah. Just so happened that it had little snippets of the rest of the album.
I think probably that came from me getting to the end of this song, writing it and going, all right, I want to try leaning harder into this genre for this next song. And so each song that I went through, I tried to lean harder into some certain genres and probably ended up doing that a bit.
Yep.
So this first one is probably the most balanced in the genres, in the stylistically balanced one on the album, I would say.
Yeah.
I think it's probably one of the longer ones there as well. I think even Steve, who played the drums on there, commented, it's like, you stuck the longest thing as the first one just to, scare everyone off. And
it's not that long.
No.
I guess it might be long to him.
Yeah, it's probably felt longer playing it, but it's definitely not like Winter Sun's debut record where every song is longer than the one before it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if they'd stuck a 13-minute epic as the first song and then a 2-minute Beyond the Dark Sun as the final song, it would have felt a little different in the album. But we more or less did it that way around, sort of. I don't feel that's a big problem. It might turn some people off. It might be a bit of a gate to scare some people off, but
good.
Yeah, exactly.
Those people needed scaring off. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's interesting. It's the first I'd considered how long the song is. Even versus the other songs, or it's certainly not a long song by the standards of the music I normally listen to, but
yeah,
it certainly doesn't feel too long. It doesn't feel like anything drags out. There are some long songs getting around, even some songs of our own that are long, not for the sake of being long, but you feel as you're listening that you actually think to yourself, God damn, this is a long song. Whereas Ashes, no way. Never had that cross my mind.
If you can measure how long it is just by looking at how many lyrics there are in that song compared to the other ones. Like if there's more stanzas, no.
Well, that
doesn't look like it.
That's not a very good control.
No, it isn't. I thought it would be, but I don't think
Depends on how fast you are saying them, how much time you spend not saying them, because you're flat out with your guitar.
The other thing about this one, I think, is it's probably not on any of the extremes of pacing, the speed of the song. It's what I might call a mid-paced metal song for the most part. Metal, it has its extremes, and one of them is speed, and there are guys going both directions.
Yeah.
There's guys trying to be the fastest, and there's guys trying to be the slowest.
Oh, yeah.
And so mid-paced metal isn't really trying to extremely be the most mid-paced metal there is. That's a bit trickier, but
extremely mid-paced.
But there's a band I really love called Theophing, right? They've had folkier and less folkier albums, but they had an album called Farsotstida and one called Helvete. I think probably pronunciation's wrong, but those two albums were together, and they made me fall back in love with the mid-paced metal.
Okay.
It wasn't trying to extremely do one thing with this way or another.
Yeah.
But it was just solid. It was just good. And it was just found that right balance. And I really loved those couple of albums by those guys. And I think Helvete was a reference I gave our engineer, Mitter, in like that's what I want to sound like kind of thing. That's
Okay.
one of the influences.
Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, might want to pull that one out and listen to it again. But yes, my money is on that's a very well produced, good sounding record.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't think there's much of that music that really comes out in Ashes. But I'm trying to think of the riffs there and where I ripped them off from.
They always come from somewhere.
Yeah,
There's nothing original anymore.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. But sometimes you know.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
yeah.
and then sometimes you're just like, I think now actually that very first run, that at the very beginning,
Yeah.
is one I didn't realize, but comes from a Dimmu Borgir song. I'm pretty sure on Death Cult Armageddon,
Right.
they do the same thing at the beginning of one of their songs, and
Right.
that's fine. You know, I mean, it's not like I was trying to emulate Dimmu Borgir, but I did. One of the things I did want to do was jump straight into the music without any atmospheric stuff beforehand.
Okay.
You know, I know that is a very good way of making a big solid impact in the beginning.
That's one thing that got me when I first heard the song was that immediate okay, everyone listen up, black metal right now.
Yeah.
But it's only for like 3 seconds.
Yeah. Yes, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah. And then there's a bit of stuff and then there's a bit more black metal.
Yeah.
And then everything drops out and there's just the bass guitar. So that bit at the very beginning is like it's like an intro to the album, but not to the song almost. It's like the
Sure.
song stops and then
Yeah.
you get the new intro where the bass comes in.
Yep.
And it comes in with the actual song. That I think that might have been kind of my intention was to kind of it was part of the thing where I wanted to start off the live show with this thing that introduces us in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even lyrically it kind of does that. It's like saying, although we'll get to the lyrics and they're not about us as a band or something, but the idea of saying, oh, you know, we're here, you didn't know we were here, but now we are. It was a kind of a wink wink. Also, actually, you've never heard us before. This is what we're going to sound like now. And then it's like, stop. All right, we'll go and do the rest of the song now. Yeah, we just start doing our thing. I think those first couple of riffs are a little bit behemoth. There's a song on Evangelion, I think, that's a mid-paced metal song, and we're like a simplified version of that. And there's a little runs and licks there that I just stole from all over the place.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to learn a psychroptic song on the guitar at some point, and there's just little legato flicks in there, and I just shoved those in there as well. And then there's some gallops, and I think eventually the song goes to doom, and it's like, I guess by that point, by the time we've done black metal, the little thrashy stuff, screaming stuff, mid-pace stuff.
Yeah.
Once we've hit doom, we've probably got all the stuff that we need for Loom of Time by
then
that
you
point.
go on some like soaring prog adventure as well. There's bits in the album. Where it's just like, oh man, that sounds enormous, but so lush.
Lush.
Yeah.
That's probably production rather than writing, I'm sure.
Well, but yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. You did it on purpose, though, right?
Mm.
It's not like you got it back off Midder and was like, oh man, that sounds awesome. Where did you get that from?
Yeah.
Thank you for doing
splice
that.
more of that in there. Yeah. No, yeah. I think you can kind of hear as well. I think I may have started to give up on it a little bit as things go on, but it's like whenever I play a riff, if I'm going to play it twice, I better play it differently the second time around.
Really?
I think the goal there was to have these songs that were just sequential and non-repeating.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe we should get down into the really fine details and never play even the same bit twice. So, you know...
Don't even play the same time signature twice.
Well, yeah. I mean, how many notes are there on the fretboard? Like, we can just go up them one by one, never hit the same one. No. There's got to be it's got to give somewhere.
Sure.
But, there at the beginning, it's like this... And then at the end of each of those four phrases, there's a different thing at the end. So, or whatever. Yeah. So it didn't matter. At that point, I think I was in the mood to try and make it different every time.
Yeah.
And I think the way I was thinking of writing that way as well, and this came into the practicality of knowing that I wanted to do it with a band, was that I tried to make the drums and the bass kind of scalable because I didn't know who was going to be playing them.
Sure.
So I know I could write the guitars so that I could play them myself,
Yep.
and I knew what I could play, so I just wrote it. But I kind of had in my mind that as long as it was certain pacing and the chord changes were a certain way, and as long as, I guess, none of the music was so finitely arranged that it had to be played on the drums a certain way or had to be played on the bass a certain way, then we could get the greatest range of musicians to join the band, and they could bring it up to their level without
taking away from what was intended.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of unsure about how that might have actually affected how the song came out, and if it would have been different if I had thought other ways.
Did it change when you brought a second guitarist in at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
And certainly our upcoming album, as yet unreleased, is written with two guitars in mind,
Sure.
whereas this one was not. This one was written with one, and then we added second guitar parts to make it more interesting for the studio record, right? As I've mentioned. But my future music after this is written with two in mind.
Always, yeah.
So, I think that will play a role in how different it might sound in comparison. There's, again, plenty of guitar parts in the song and how it works, but they're an extra layer. They're icing. They're topping.
Yeah.
They're not functional. If you took them away, the song never stops.
Sure.
There's no gap of silence where the guitar would be missing if we took those pieces out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that might be the difference that it makes, is that there's always a strong driving rhythm part to it that can always be carried by just one person if necessary.
Yeah.
And maybe that affects how the song's pacing feels. And I do feel like the song it feels like it keeps pulling forward and keeps pushing forward and moving on. And perhaps the whole music does that way. And perhaps that's a part of the fact that I knew that I had to just carry it on one guitar and that you just had to do what you had to do. And it's almost like you couldn't do anything too fancy because it might break down if you don't even know what kind of musicians you're going to be playing with at some point.
Yeah.
If I'm like, all right, drum and bass solo.
Especially, the idea that you got to take it to the stage, it has to work there.
Yeah. If I'd just left space for the bass solo or whatever and then got a bass player who couldn't play one, then it falls apart. So there's that being said, I do like to leave gaps for the bass, and that's evident in that first part of the song.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's almost important at least once on an album to do that because it's like it shows you how the album is balanced and built. And when you sometimes, there's albums, probably quite famous albums, that almost have no bass on that you can hear, almost inaudible.
I can think of one.
Yeah, and it's if you don't know that it's there, sometimes you can kind of take it for granted. And so when you take all the guitars out and you just let the bass breathe, then those frequencies and that sound and how much distortion it's got and what it's doing is now part of how you hear the rest of the song. So I like to put at least a piece somewhere here and there where things get their solo spot.
Yeah,
spotlight. Not necessarily in an indulgent prog wankery way, yes, but in a sonic way so that you can better piece together. I'm surprised that's come out of my brain just now because I think I'd forgotten that was part of the process. But yeah, I think...
You did it on purpose?
Yeah, I think so.
For that reason?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I also, and it might be a strange thing to think of as a consideration when you're writing a song, but if you give the people in your band the chance to shine in whatever way, I think it gives a certain ownership of the song to the person,
Yep.
And I think if you can get your band to invest in the song, then they'll give a better performance.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think that ever ended up being a problem because the drummer wrote the drum parts and the bass player was a seasoned bass player, and it's not like it was an issue. But to think that part of the process in my brain of writing a song involved band politics at that stage when I didn't have a band or anyone to play with.
Oh yeah.
It's strange to think about that it might have affected the creative process in that way. But I'm surprised even, thinking about it myself, thinking back on it now, how much every piece, when you've got a mission, okay, and you know what you want to do, how much it gets down into all the nitty gritty details of what you're doing when you're sort of that focused on doing that one thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's one piece of it. I'm sure there are other parts where I'm like, all right, now it should be, the drums should do a thing, and
Little spotlight here and there.
Yeah, let the band be part of the band. You know, when you've got people in the band, you also don't want to sideline people.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a collaborative element to music, because it's, you know, the word concert, you know, it's like musicians playing together.
Them together, yeah.
So what you can do in the writing process to accentuate that, I think, probably adds value.
Yeah, for sure. You said, you know, that the Ashes is a whole bunch of firsts, you know, the first song you wrote, first song on the record, first song you played live. Being that's the first song that you wrote, did you record that one first as well? How did it sit in the studio?
In the studio?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure I remember.
The order of the events.
Yeah, because again, you do like layers of songs first. You do all the drums first,
Sure.
and then all the guitars or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I had been doing things my way, it would have been that chronological order,
Yeah.
just because I'm that way minded, and it just would make sense that way. But I think when it came to record drums, I think you got to be considerate of the drummer's energy levels and what they're doing on any given day. And so
Might have done something first to break the ice. Or...
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure whether that meant it did or didn't come first, but I have a feeling songs...
It wasn't a separate thing. You know, you released it as a single like months before the album came out.
Yeah.
Months?
Probably.
Yeah. It wasn't a song that you sort of finished Holders Boulders before the rest of the record. You recorded the whole record as a session.
Yeah. I know that a lot of bands, when they go into the studio, aren't finished writing necessarily, and they hash it out in that space.
Yeah.
But that was not the case here. Again, because I'd had the songs for so long before I'd managed to find musicians to put into the band.
Okay. So
it was all pretty well finalized, more or less, before we went in there. Just saving the things that those guys brought to the
you
table.
You didn't hit the studio with the intent to make and release a single and then come back and do the album again?
No.
Okay.
Again, you know, when I set out, I thought, you know, I'll write an EP's worth of material, and it turned out to be a bit more than that.
Sure.
It's not the longest album. It feels like a long EP or a short LP. I'm not sure which way to think of it.
How long is it in total?
I think it's less than 40 minutes.
Okay.
So
yeah.
30 something.
Yeah,
probably.
it's just scraping in there, I think.
Yeah. So
I know that there's a rule book.
Yeah. Well, no, it's what you call it is what it is sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, I've always felt like the little orchestral one that we did later was an EP rather than a single. It didn't feel like it was... Single kind of says it's part of a bigger whole, whereas that one was designed to stand alone, if you know what I mean. So, but
it's a big adventure of a song anyway.
It is, but it's still only one song though, so
sure.
You know, it's like when Dream Theater released A Change of Seasons, it's 20 minutes long, or I think Meshuggah did one of those as well.
Yeah,
they probably didn't feel like, oh, it's the new single. You know, here's our new hit single.
It's a record. It just happens to have one track. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. So no, The Ashes of Your Fall was not designed as Loom of Time's hit single. You know,
you could say that it is, though, just by it's the first track that you released. It's the first track on the record. It's an excellent introduction to a gateway to the rest of the record. I would be happy to guess that would be the punter's favorite song on the record.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have a favorite, but I can see why that one would be the favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of felt like it might be the pinnacle of the second track, because it's a bit shorter and a bit more concise and more easily digestible. But then when some, online DJs and whatever started picking the album up, they would tend to pick the Peons of the Cosmos.
Really?
Yeah, which is quite long and quite dark and relentless in a way. It doesn't have much breathing room in it. Yet that's the one they picked. And I was like, I wouldn't have picked it.
It's got a huge intro too. But anyway, there'll be a whole episode about that song. Yeah.
I think the end of that song as well, Ashes, has quite a long just one riff going on for a long time, and after the lyrics have finished, it's like it's just a rhythm, and then the drums do the same thing, and it's like the same riff actually a whole bunch of times. I think that was kind of an artistic indulgence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like me going, I can do whatever I want. I can play the same thing as long as I want. I can make the song as long as I want. I could do this for 20 minutes if I wanted. And that was kind of what I did. And
deliverance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Deliverance.
Yes, people sitting in the audience going, it's still going.
Yeah.
But I know exactly where we're up to.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe that was my version of the end of Deliverance, although once I'd written it, we did try to change it up by changing the drums on one part of it, and it switches just to snares for the end and so on. And I'm not sure whether that was intended in the beginning, but maybe that was one of Steve's I
remember one
additions.
Unique experience with that outro with the snare change. He ended up playing at halftime because he spent the whole time with one stick.
Okay.
Yeah. He made it work.
Yeah.
We just played it in halftime, and it was like, well,
yes.
Then you could see him kind of scrambling around on the floor for it, and I was like, what's he doing? Oh,
he's
he just played the whole bit with one stick.
Wow. Okay. Yep. Impressive work,
yeah.
Steve. That's one part of being a musician is learning to keep going. Just having a stop in the middle is not the best way to do
it. Guys. What? Get on with it.
Yeah. If it worked. That's good. That's fine. But so the ending was a bit of an indulgence. But I'm trying to think if there's any real chorus in this song. I don't know that there is. I think there's a little piece in the middle there that sounds kind of like the first, what you might call verse. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of repetition in it.
No. There's a couple, the different verses or whatever you want to call them, how they're different. They're all different parts of the song. They've all got their own sort of, signature, their own character. I really like the last lyrics in the song when the song sort of quietens right down before the outro. Yeah. And it's all sort of clean singing for the most part. But
so that's that riff there, classic Candlemass. It's like, I think at least once on each album they have to do a thing where they just pull everything back in the mix, dial down the distortion a little bit,
let the guy speak,
boom, boom, boom. Just a simple 4-note 4-chord progression, and just ease it out, and then bring back the same thing in the heavy version. I'm sure they've done it a couple of times, and it's just a trademark, I think. Couldn't help myself, had to do it. It's like a bucket list of musical ideas that I had to do before I die. It's not like I can join a thrash band and a death metal band and a doom band and get these ticked off my list one by one over a long period of time.
Should make it happen in 1 6-minute.
Exactly. So that's what I did. Again, that's that philosophy of treating it like it might be the last album you make. So I got to get it all out there.
Yeah.
So that was the Candlemass. That was the Behemoth in the beginning. There's a little thrashy stuff, and there's a few little gallops in there here and there, just for that
the
new wave of classic, British heavy metal and power metal, and there's when we came time to
more
add
Behemoth in the middle.
There would be, yes. The guitar harmonies was a good chance to do the power metal, new wave of British heavy metal things. And again, I feel like these genres, if you bring any two metal genres together, they can fit together. Bringing 3 or more is harder, but
form a new genre.
But so I didn't
yet to be named.
So I didn't have any hard times really fitting that stuff together. And because it was the first song that we did, I don't think it was particularly difficult to write. One thing I do like to try and do, I guess, except on the first song in a way, is that I try to make sure that every song has at least one thing that makes it unique from all the others.
Okay.
So it might, in trying to be creative, it might be too difficult to get to a point where you're making every song completely different from each other. And one that makes it really hard stylistically to have any cohesion in it, and it'll just make your album a mess. But I think if you make sure that there's one thing in there that's unique and you've never done before, it gives that song its signature. Now, in typical or more typically arranged music, you can make a more simple signature because you can give it a chorus that has a certain lick or hook and a certain lyric. But with this music, it's a bit harder to give that the identity where people go, oh, that's the song where that happens.
Yeah.
Now, when you mention a certain song, just from the name of the song, they're probably the chorus jumps into their head, okay? And they can identify it as, oh, that's the song where they do that. Quite often
the title of the song is in the chorus, right?
Yeah. But for this kind of music, it's not so simple. So for this kind of music, I think there's got to be some other way of saying, oh, it's the song that happens in. And if you can't do that, then maybe you've just got a song, that's an album of the songs that are the same. And was there a great purpose to writing all those songs the same song? So it's not an easy thing to do, and there's a balance there somewhere between being totally different all the time and just doing the same thing all the time. But that's why I thought my one thing rule was gonna work out. Now, what it was in that first song, I couldn't tell you because it's the first song I wrote. So
it was a concept that came later.
Yeah. So at least from the second song, I would have had to have put something in the second song that we had not done in the first song. Okay, but during the first song, I was just free range to do whatever I wanted.
And my homework is to figure out for next episode in the second song. What is it in the second song that isn't done on?
Yeah, what's the thing?
What's the thing of the second song?
Yeah.
All right,
what's
I'll try
the
to
thing
remember
where we do that thing? Actually, I think lyrically, this might be one of the most interesting ones on there because it has the most. I'm going to say lore. It's it may not be as up. Straightforward as it might initially look, because I don't think it looks much different from anything else we've done on the record.
Right.
But the thought process was different.
Okay.
So I mentioned before that I was reading Nietzsche and Thus Spake Zarathustra. And the things he was writing about were in my mind, sure. But there was this part of me that... so when Nietzsche was writing, he I use a line from his book there. It says, now that God is dead. God is dead is his most sort of iconic phrase there.
Okay.
And he was just describing, when people abandon the higher power as their source of morality, how do they act and how do they decide to do it? And throughout his book and his writing, he kind of gives humanity a reason to do things a certain way. He sort of, he gives them these goals to strive for. And, I'll probably have the Philosophy 101 kids coming to eat me when I say things like this because I'll be oversimplifying or getting it wrong or whatever. But he was kind of talking about, even if life doesn't have much meaning now in some way, that if you strive towards the higher places that humanity could go, at the very least, you could end up being a stepping stone to something that has this true meaning. And at the same time, it'll give you a meaning for your life, and you might be the one that ascends to the next stage of whatever humanity is going to be. And so he really felt like, and enunciates it through the book, that he was giving this gift to humanity, and that if people took up his ideas, that it would make the world a better place, and things would be better for everyone, and people would be happier in themselves, and it would be better for the relationships between people and all this stuff. And he was convinced that he was doing a really good thing there. But he was aware, and it comes through in his writing, that was not the way things were going. People were not taking up what he was saying, and he ended up at certain stages getting misquoted, and his writings got adopted by people he didn't like, and it was frustrating to him. And there's parts of the book where you read it, if you know this stuff is happening to him, and I did a bit of reading on him when I was reading it, that it's kind of a tragic thing to watch as the great work of his life is falling apart before his eyes. And not only that, but Nietzsche, as he in his older age, or I'm not sure how old he actually got, but he had some quite bad sort of mental health issues, and back then they didn't really have a good way of dealing with that, and they didn't understand it as well as we did now. And in those days, at least, the idea is essentially that Nietzsche went mad, as it were, as he grew older. And
no other way to diagnose
and
it.
Although I wouldn't condone that kind of language and that way of thinking about mental health, in my sort of headcanon, it was kind of like the author Lovecraft, this fantasy author, it's one of his great techniques is to have his characters go mad when they discover something that they can't assimilate into what they know about the world. They meet something so shocking that they go mad and it breaks them. And when I was thinking about that kind of thing, it kind of felt like when Nietzsche was looking at the world falling apart and the way that his writings were being misappropriated and the gift that he had given to everyone was being discarded and ignored, that it kind of broke him in a way, and it kind of sent him mad in that way. Now, I wouldn't really think that that would be the case, and I think maybe I've read somewhere that they think he might have had syphilis or something like that. There's some explanation, but the point is, it was like he couldn't deal with the fact that he'd done this great work and that he knew it, and that it was falling apart.
It was lost on people.
Yeah. And so when I thought about that, I thought about what if it was the other way around, or what if people now did turn things around and they took up what he thought was a good way to live, and they started listening to those things and they started self-actualizing and being better and so on. And so the lyrics in this song are kind of from the point of view of a generation of people who discover the antidote to the nihilism that pervades society. And so when you look at the lyrics now, you can say, this is about people going, all right, this is the way the world is and how it has been. We're not going to stand for that anymore. We've decided to make things better. We've decided to make ourselves better. And of course, because I had to write it angrily, there's also some criticisms of the people who aren't doing it that way in there as well. So I think when you look at it with that in mind, you've got this idea that it's about people turning things around, and this didn't happen, and it hasn't happened, and I don't think it is happening. So in some ways, this song is more a fantasy than any other lyric that I've probably written, and is the least involved in real life. But it's kind of this cross between my headcanon and reading the kind of sadness of what happened to Nietzsche and how things turn around. As a preview, I think more or less on our second album, our upcoming album, there's kind of a sequel to this song.
Okay.
We'll leave it for that now, but it's basically like, that stuff didn't happen, so how are we looking? But yeah, that's what I was thinking when I wrote this one. So I think that one has this weird fantasy element to it that isn't quite just a simple thing, and it's also told from a perspective that of people that don't exist, more or less.
Right.
It's strange in that way. I'm just remembering now as well that I kind of wanted to include a lot of the plural self-reference there. So it says we and our. And, that was, I think, a technique that I wanted to put in there that kind of helps create a bit of ownership between the audience and what they're listening to. And certainly in a live situation, when you know the lyrics and you want to say we and our, it kind of puts you into the music a little bit more. And I think that was something I had observed in the hardcore scene from what little I had dipped into it, because I feel like there's a lot of that music has that mentality. It's very group focused, perhaps more than metal is. They like the idea of family and group and connection and group movement, and I guess because it's hooked into punk a little bit, there's that social movements and gatherings and so on. Metal's a little bit more introspective and I don't want to say self-obsessed, but
you could say that.
You could say that. Metal as a rule tends to be a little more inward-looking than outward-looking. And just because I knew that the scene around at that time was more of a group mentality thing, I wanted to put group-type lyrics in there.
Was that the reason for the technique? Did the local scene at the time have that influence on that technique you're talking about, or was it more to do with the perspective of the lyricist, per se, the protagonist,
whatever,
as society in general? That's how it reads to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, this might be one of those things where I say you might be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the influence of the hardcore scene that's influencing me to do that. Because
Wow.
there might be a way for me to do it without doing that. And
Okay, yeah.
I think as I become more comfortable with writing lyrics and so on as I've gone on, I have used a more personal pronoun perspective than
Sure.
the we and the us. At least then, yeah, I think you might see a couple of places in the album where we use that kind of language, and I think it was the hardcore influence. You know, this is a genre I don't listen to, and went to one show, and already I'm thinking that way because it was what I saw around me.
That's what they're thinking.
Maybe that feels kind of like being a sellout and pandering and catering to a certain audience.
You've just confessed to it.
Yeah, but at the same time, I guess there's enough of me in there that I don't think I was too worried about pandering. I think if I was really pandering to an audience, I just
you would have just made a hardcore band.
Yeah. Well, if I really wanted to pander to the widest audience I could possibly pander to, it wouldn't have been very heavy at all, probably. But
you would have just made Kings of Leon or whatever.
yeah.
Something
super
popular.
Yeah. But the thing is, I know there's a lot of there's crossover between metal and hardcore and punk and all those things. Yeah. And so if I knew that I was going to be in that scene, it might be the case that, if we ended up playing a hardcore show, that although I was able to do the metal thing that I know and love, there would be something to appreciate for the people that were in the audience at the time.
The breakdowns.
Yeah. Always comes back to the breakdowns.
Yeah. So they can dance.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a strange thing to talk about, and it almost feels dirty talking about it because it kind of feels like wearing a band shirt when you don't listen to the music almost. But
no one does that, surely.
No, I mean, I've heard.
I've heard about it.
Yeah. It's influenced enough that it coloured the way that things came out.
Well, there you go. That has surprised me.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah. Well,
I'm here to learn.
Maybe I should...
What do you think?
Edit,
leave it in the
delete,
comments.
Cut all that stuff out.
As you were explaining, I've seen throughout the record, and I know we're here just to talk about Ashes, but there's that same technique a lot the way throughout the record, really. Lots of we, lots of us, some of you. Yeah, I.
You is easy because, that's just building your straw man and being angry and critical, and the angry thing so I could fit it with the music, that's a simple thing to do.
But in the line that I've seen it in, it's a direct comparison to we and us.
Yeah, okay.
We've done this, and it's done this with us, and then you've done this other thing, man, idiot.
Sort of starting to get self-conscious. Did I really do it all the time? Actually, I probably did.
I can't remember any place where, you use I.
No.
If you're talking about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, not you, per se, but...
But,
Here we go.
Oh, you found one?
I will not morally bankrupt myself. That's for episode 4. Let's push that away.
But yeah, I think it's not a very personal record. I don't think it's like... Again, particularly emotionally mature album or whatever.
There are those albums, but this isn't one of them.
No, and I don't think it needed to be because it wasn't the kind of music that I wanted to make. The punter's going to have more fun with being angry and including the group and all that stuff than me being introspective and singing about something that's true.
What can we sing about ourselves, honestly?
It's quite critical and, mean. I don't think I'd ever say some of this stuff to a real person. It's quite... I'm glad that there's no one... You're
saying it to the wider audience.
Yeah, well, or, when you say stuff like this, do you assume that no one in the audience is going to assume it's about them? Because otherwise they'll be like, oh, where...
Someone so vain in any audience that would think it's about them, right? I wrote a song about that too.
I wonder when people listen to anyone that's being overly critical of someone, do they feel it in themselves?
It's a horoscope.
Yeah.
You can write anything and someone will liken it to something in their own life.
Yeah, okay. In some way that's good, but is it also the opposite way around, where people are quite convinced that they're a good person and that no one could write such angry things about them because they're right on the money and do everything
Until
good?
you write the correct thing
Yeah.
that makes them go, oh, wow,
Yeah. So
it's about me.
so yeah, I suppose you're hoping for that, I suppose, but at the same time, I don't know if you are.
Who's hoping for it?
Well,
The person or
no, I mean,
you?
yeah, you when you write a song, you're hoping it connects with someone.
Sure.
And in a positive way.
Beating them into a...
Well, you'd hope that it's a gentle enough, correction that it's not phrased that way. It's phrased very meanly, but
yeah.
I think because it's in a song and because it's not in a private message to the person, that it's going to be taken differently, and that's a good thing, because when people feel personally targeted, it feels like they almost get more resistant to listening to what's being said.
Okay.
So in a way, you don't want to feel like someone's being personally targeted. I'm talking like these lyrics are really important and I had a mission to do here, but you got to remember, I do not.
It was
I
the second...
honestly thought that writing lyrics this way would make the song better.
Well, I can't argue with that. Even though they were lesser importance than the music, without the lyrics. The lyrics were just, the vocals were there to, improve the sound or the song, sonically. But, these lyrics have substance.
It's, I think I said in an interview with some guy once that one of the influences on the lyrics was Nergal from Behemoth.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, what? It's like, there's no mention of Satan in here at all. It's like, what are you talking about? But it wasn't his content. It was his conviction.
Yeah.
It's like he really puts his emotion into it. And I think if you got to write lyrics in a certain way so that you can put your emotion into them.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about actors who complain about script writers because they've given them trash to work with.
Right.
I'm sure Russell Crowe was quite angry at whoever wrote Gladiator.
Overall, puffery that no man would ever be caught dead saying, it was shit, but I'm the greatest actor in the world, and I can make even shit sound good. Russell Crowe. Allegedly.
Because they were, and told them so on the set, and was quite angry about it, but...
You motherfucker, I will kill you with my bare hands. Russell Crowe, to Gladiator producer Brenko Lustig. Allegedly.
I think he might even won awards for that movie or whatever. But there's something where if you write it right at the source, then it'll be easier to do a good job in the booth.
Sure, that's right, yeah.
And so you got to put in an effort somewhere. If you want the music to be good, then you have to pay attention to these things, even though they wouldn't be important by themselves.
Right, yeah. As a piece of the puzzle. And you consciously thought out those things, those puzzle pieces to fit together from the get-go. Or maybe not from the get-go, but long before you got to the studio.
I think...
Because these, in my experience, are things that sometimes can, even though the song's written and you know how the song goes and you've rehearsed it and you can go to the studio and bash the thing out in 2 takes, there's certain elements of those puzzle pieces you're talking about that you might not have even realised until you're there. Or maybe you've been lucky enough before the studio that you've been able to play the song live a few times, so you know how the song kind of vibes as a whole.
That was one concern was with vibe, and I think there's, because of the way it's written and so on, there's not a lot of groove and vibe in the songs. Things change too quickly before you can get a atmosphere going or a groove going.
Still has a vibe.
Yeah,
not necessarily a groove, but you can feel what's happening, what's going on.
And it is a concern when you write the way that I've written that that the vibe is going to be an issue because you're not writing it. I know a lot of bands do write in a band situation and they riff on things and they just play things over and over and see what fits together and they groove it,
Yep.
And I couldn't do that because I didn't have any musicians to write with. And so it was a concern of mine that might be an issue when it comes time, when the song comes out, but you just got to roll with it, I think. And if the vibe if there's no vibe, I don't know, and then it's not the best song, all right, hopefully you get it next time, whatever. But, with this kind of music, I think maybe it wasn't so much of an issue because it's not a groovy kind of music, that getting those band vibes wasn't as crucial to what makes the music the way it is. I think what makes the music good in the case of the Loom of Time isn't that we just sit in the pocket and get a groove going and get a feel. It's more about the way it's constructed and put together in a sort of more meticulous fashion. And so when you say, were you really worrying about those things at that early stage? Yeah, I was.
Yeah, okay.
And the thing, there's lots of sort of art forms that I admire and people who have done certain things that I admire. And so it's easy to see in movies when you've got a special edition or whatever and you're looking at the behind the scenes and you hear about the creators talking about the way they do things. We went, probably went through English class at high school and read a poem or whatever we had to study, and the teacher's telling us this is the depth of the reason that they did this thing. And we go, no, they didn't. They're just writing what they feel like, whatever, man. But then I think I have to admit my younger self was wrong on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure maybe some people do, but a lot of guys, there's way more depth into why they're putting exactly what they're putting and where they're putting it than we realize. And sometimes it's like, it's a little bit snake oilish, but there's this movie called Akira. It's a Japanese animation, right?
Okay.
And one of the features that they highlighted on one of the releases was that the sound that they had made for the movie included a whole bunch of frequencies that the human ear cannot hear, but they were sure that those frequencies just being there, and although they're not picked up by the hairs or parts of the ear that are important, that it still affects the experience of watching that film, right?
Listening to hypersonic sound, which is rich in ultra-high frequency components, leads to an increase in cerebral blood flow and in the alpha waves seen in electroencephalograms, improvements in immune activity, a decrease in stress hormones, and other physiological benefits, as well as causing the listener to find that sound more beautiful, pleasant, and moving. Tsutomu Uhashi, PhD.
And so I'm actually not sure that that's true. I think that's probably a snake oil in that case. But
people would believe it though, just to be told that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do think there is something to be said that when you go to the extra effort of depth that doesn't get to the surface of what you're creating, it's still in there as a part of it, and it comes out the way it does because you've done those things, even if they aren't present when in the final product.
Do you think the person would enjoy, like they hadn't noticed it on the first or second pass, but if you then pointed out that, what do I call it, that feature or that concept, would they enjoy it more? Would they pick up on it and then they can't not pick up on it?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it would depend what it is.
Yeah, and I think humans and the way they deal with these things there's too much bias in it for us to be able to tell.
Sure.
Like, if someone has put money into something, they're inclined to enjoy it more, for example, So if you tell someone, oh, this is a much more fancy version of the thing that you've enjoyed normally, you'll enjoy it more. They might be like, oh, wow, I am enjoying it more. I feel it, but really they're not. But, I mean, those bad examples aside, there's a surprising amount of detail in these. Edgar Wright's a movie director, and he made Shaun of the Dead, right? You watch the special features on that bad boy, and they go into the stupidest, craziest depth on that thing that you would not believe. Like, this conversation they have at the beginning about how they're just going to go to each pub and have drinks is actually a shorthand description of the plot of the rest of the film. Right. And you don't know, I could say you definitely not know unless you're told. But having all those little details in there, and by extension in my music, to have all these little things that are going on in my brain as I write it, and these conceptions at that even far before stage, but making sure you go into that detail, I think creates affects the end product in a certain way, that it feels more granular and detailed to the people listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've mentioned before, it's more like it's not for everyone, and every person that's going to listen to it is going to pick up on those things. But there are people out there that are that way inclined.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who enjoy detail in their art, if you put it in there, it's rewarding to those people. So
Worth
yes,
it.
yeah. And even if no one ever picked up on it, it's almost doesn't matter, because it doesn't really cost me anything to have a philosophy in place before I write it.
Yeah, sure.
They're almost arbitrary details, but if you've got a basis for it, why not use the knowledge that you have to make it a certain way? The worst that's going to happen, it's going to just make it more how you are, and it's going to make you more unique to what you're like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a song that has a particular quirk like that as well. The more you explain, the more I realise that, there is a song, it's one of Phil's songs, and it's got a particular quirk that I guess to the casual listener you wouldn't realise unless you pointed it out to them. They're like, yeah, it does too. But it's cool because he did it for himself and thought, this is really cool.
Yes.
And it was a song structure thing, and then the lyrical content kind of lent itself to that structural concept as well.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
And it's because I had to learn it.
Sure.
And having the explanation helped me. Tell us the song.
Okay. So it's a song by Phil. It's on our album Mortem in Dios, and it's called Red Sun Rises. It's quite a long song. Very long song. And I guess it's repetitive as well, but it's repetitive for a reason. So the concept that I'm talking about, the particular quirk, is that each chorus part, it's interesting. The verses lyrically are the same as each other. The verses repeat, and then the chorus is the thing that has the lyrical changes. And each chorus comes along, and it has an extra bar. Each time the chorus happens, there is an extra bar. And it is the want for more, successively more stuff each time you get one thing.
Is chorus lyrically longer as well? Like there's extra lines on there?
Yes, yep. So some of those lines repeat, and then they add extra bits at the end. So it's always like this striving for something more, like nothing is enough.
Yep.
So those extra bars are added each time, and the lyrics are... there's more vocal parts to each of those choruses as well, and some of them repeat. But then there's more, and that's the concept: is always more. I want more.
Yeah,
it's
an escalation of sacrifices.
I've got this before, and then lyrically, it was about the Aztec, or one of the Aztec or Mayan sun gods that those people sacrificed to ensure that the sun would rise the next day, and there would be people in those societies who would convince the population that the sacrifices were not enough, and they would use the fear, the idea that the sun won't rise unless the sacrifices are sufficient. And if you give him the same as what he got yesterday, he's not going to be happy with that. He needs more. So the sacrifices and blood sacrifices, and they get more and more elaborate and more sinister, and that's basically the gist of the lyrics too. To basically they're offering the blood sacrifices of anyone and everything they can get their hands on. And that was just a songwriting quirk that Phil wanted to add in, and we sort of all got on board. It was really interesting, and so one of the songs where he wrote the music and the lyrics all himself to fit together, and pretty happy with that song.
Yeah.
But it's super long,
epic
super brutal
track.
song. Really heavy song.
Yeah.
I enjoyed playing that one live.
Yeah. So, I mean, these sort of details, you say that people don't notice them unless they're pointed out to them, but maybe that's true on some level, but it's also possibly true that people do pick up on them in some way. And of course, there's some people who look for those things and then they find them. Yeah. And there's some people who are just subtly influenced by it in some way.
Yeah.
All those things, I guess, are just part of music and how humans interact with it, and the strange play between the technical side of music writing and the psychological side of how humans perceive it and absorb it and so on. So there's a lot of stuff we just don't know about humans and our brains, and we can't quantify them, and it's really hard to measure, and there's so many biases that we can't account for and so on. But it's like when we do it for ourselves and when we add those details, I don't think it costs us anything to do it.
Sure.
And it adds depth if there is depth to be found.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. There's a lot of little weird quirks and things that you just let get into your music.
If it wasn't there, we wouldn't be talking about it right now.
That's right.
There's that.
And so, it's destroying the mystique of, the mystery of, that I hide behind, of course, that I've been maintaining this entire time. But
the enigma,
yes,
Matthew Ratcliffe.
If it enlightens someone to think about the way that they create in a different way, that's cool. I think, taking influence from things like movies and putting them into my music, I'm starting to think that movies are influencing my music a lot more than I realize.
Good.
In the sort of philosophy that you embody when you write it. Mm-hmm. But I think if it changes the way people think about their own music, that's a good thing. It's like I kind of told myself that if I could influence even just one person with this album, before I released it, if even one person listened to it and went, well, I'm definitely not doing that, I've done something positive to the world.
Yeah. Avoided another catastrophe.
Yeah, so it's, I kind of, perhaps with this thing we're doing right now, it's the same deal, Mm-hmm. If someone can get something out of it, then it's going to be it's like you've added to the, it's going to sound, a bit overwrought, but if you've added to the creative consciousness of mankind, then, you've done something that's going to live on potentially forever in the iterations of music that comes after it. So, yeah.
So long as they take from this
something, anything,
You got that? This podcast is about you.
I'll be checking. Yeah, there will be a quiz.
There was a time, a memory I have, and I'm sure you remember it too, if I remind you, that when you were playing guitar in Evocatus, and we were at rehearsal in Newcastle, and we were between songs, like what song should we play next? And I just said, let's play Ashes of Your Fall. And then Adam just went, tick, 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 and then we all just started doing it. And we were like, oh, we're really doing this.
I was so amazed how far through that song we got.
We could all get, because Vaughn was playing it live with you guys sometimes, and Brad was in the band, and you were there, and Adam was just a super fanboy who just knew the song anyway. And I mean, I was no different. Yeah. That was the song that I was most familiar with, probably because you released it a couple of months before the rest of the record, and I listened to it like back to back, nonstop, all the time, because it was the first lyrics, right? The first lyrics in the song, and you said it wasn't about anything in particular, or the song's not about anyone or about the band or whatever, but you did not see this coming. You did not know we were here at all, and now that we've awoken, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
You hear that, you hear the and then those lyrics, and it's like, oh wow, these guys are from Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Aberdeen.
It sounds like we planned it. It's like it's a little bit meta, yeah. And yes, that was that was a wink, wink.
That pulled me in, and I was like, oh man, these guys know what is up. They know what's up. And so I love the sound, and I listened to it over and over and over again, and I had not heard any, like, there was no, you kept everything pretty close to your chest at the time. You hadn't pushed out any teasers, or we hadn't heard any demos or anything like that. I mean, not me at least, anyway. I mean, there's other guys that I know that would have heard that stuff because they had to learn the music, right?
Yeah, but that's the only situation, I think.
Until you like hit the release button and it was out for the general public, I was just the general public, and I heard it and I was like, whoa,
yeah,
this is amazing. And so I'd heard it heaps, and I got to learn it, and not on purpose. Like, it was just like
for that moment, I was in a Loom of Time cover band.
You were in a Loom of Time cover band. You come second in a Matt Ratcliffe lookalike competition.
Yes, yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Would you ever consider yourself in the Loom of Time to have like a winter sun situation where you might, because you play guitar and do lead vocals as well, where that becomes a bit difficult or the music becomes a bit elaborate for you to be able to do live both of those things. And you, like Yari, you pull back on one of those things and bring in another, a fifth member to take on one of those duties. Is that ever something that crossed your mind, or you've always sort of written to make sure that you are comfortable to do both on stage?
Yeah. I mean, I have, but I did briefly consider that as well.
Yeah.
And I guess I just got to keep bringing myself back and remembering that the more people you have in the band, the harder it is to get it to go.
Herding cats.
Yes.
And that wasn't a segue on purpose, which we talked about, we did the thing, Evocatus play the thing.
It's not an audition is what you're saying.
If ever something like that comes up, consider Shieldsy.
Yeah, I mean, so it probably was weird for me not to be doing the lyrics, the vocals at that time, but, it would be a load off of my chest.
Sure. Like anyone, halving the load.
But, I don't consider myself a particularly good vocalist or singer or whatever, but I did think that, one, it would mean that the music would get done more easily, and two, although I may not be the most professional deliverer of the vocals, I do think that I sound like me when I do it.
You definitely do.
And in a way, it was more important to do a unique job than a good one in a way.
Okay, yeah, I can appreciate that.
And so it's a little bit the part of the identity of the band is that sound, and I'm happy with that, even with my shortcomings. However, moving forward, I have worked with a number of different vocalists now on my music, and I know how that sort of functions. And, I think it's certainly something on the cards.
Yeah, going forward, you can have lots of fun. Yeah. There's more diversity coming in the next record as well, vocally.
Yes.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear it. Having only heard the little snippets that I have heard, it's going to be big.
Yes, me too. I mean, of course, at time of we're speaking, it's not mixed or mastered yet, so I haven't heard it either. So I got to wait.
Enough.
I got to wait.
You know enough. Very good.
All right. Thanks, Shieldsy. Thanks
Easy
again.
one. Thank you.
We'll pinch off another song next week.
Pinch it clean off.